Hello, friends and extended family. Today, I'm going to talk about some very upsetting information if you can fully sort of grasp it and see it and wrap your head around it. It's very disturbing material. Basically, I want to talk about the monetization of the family and how that has come to be and how it has manifested as a reality in Western culture, and it's shocking and disturbing to the extent that you understand the historical implications um, attached to things like indentured servitude and slavery. So, what we have here is a situation whereas regular citizens and regular family life has been hijacked by the system um, for monetary gain and for destructive purposes. And I'm going to point out a few um, things that we're all aware of and sort of add in the parts that aren't explicitly pointed to. So, using my own example, okay, so um, you know what, I'm not even going to use my own example. I'm going to generalize, but I'm going to add in my own experience and feelings about things so that you can understand a little better. And search your own feelings to see if I'm accurate and I'm being honest and truthful. So you take a scenario whereas you have we go back in time a little bit, and the culture is set up whereas we have families, and we have ways in which we want to structure those families and sort of baselines and rules to try and achieve to give the optimal environment for children and upbringing and whatnot. So all that being said, I mean, it's hard to argue against the Christian system of a mother and father in a home raising their children, and instilling family values and humanitarian values of, not envying your neighbor and not stealing and killing and things like that. And it's hard to disagree with those values. Um, Given the current climate, it's hard to see how someone could live up to all those values, but the ideal isn't meant. I mean, we aren't all expected to be Jesus Christ. But if you want to follow something like Christianity or other religions as well, I mean, they're all very much promoting values, unless I mean, I'm not getting into Satanism and things like that, but the main religions of the earth promote a family structure, whereas we have an agreement and a set of rules on how men and women can interact and relate to provide the ideal situation for the upbringing of the next generation of children. And I'm more than willing to debate with people, but this is designed for family, community, nation, city, nation, onward and upward, to try and create a harmonic order, whereas you'll have the least amount of disease and conflict, misery, despair, to try to create an environment where everyone can kind of start to work towards a more ideal self, a more ideal family, a more ideal community, and all those things, and that we all try to lift each other up. Okay, so all that being said, that's the ideal scenario. Okay, I'm talking generalizations, and it's very hard to disagree with that, I would say. And we don't have to talk about proofs either way. This system is designed to be a choice that you get to choose, that you would like to give up some of your um, wants and desires that you could get right now by cheating, stealing, killing, conquest, these sort of things, in exchange for cooperation, um, to help everybody have a chance at better things. So, what's happened in our Christian Western culture is that at some point we kicked our values out as associated with God and religion. And in exchange, the courts and the state intervened into what should be religious and private familiar matters, right? So we ended up with the family courts. Now, in tandem with the family courts, we also have a campaign of demoralization upon men and women. So, so men have through my lifetime, um, oftentimes, uh, we report men abandoning their children. We report men as rapists, men as deadbeat dads, men as drunk drivers, um, men as cheaters and dogs, and all sorts of very sort of nasty scenarios. Even as a kid, it was boys are puppy dog tails, and and women are cinnamon and spice and everything nice, right? So even from a childhood standpoint, we sort of have separated and started sort of denigrating our genders. So that being said, I mean, when I first got a girl pregnant and, in complete ignorance, without moral education, without a decent education, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I could take responsibility for that. And at the time, as soon as I found out the words, I'm pregnant, ding, well, we have to get married to raise that child. I have to be with my child, obviously. That was just the fact that existed within me. And from that point, though, her sister had already engaged in the child for money thing, where she got pregnant from a guy so she could get cash, and then she basically laid around the house, smoked weed, collect child support and welfare, and expected her sister, who I was dating, to come over and clean her house, because that was her responsibility as the aunt to her child, that she should come over and clean her house when she was laid out smoking weed. And, the kid was running around. It was a terrible situation for that child. But anyway, so when this one got pregnant, her sister said, like, we weren't ready or anything like that. But her sister didn't say, oh, well, you'll have to get married and da da da. She said, this is perfect because that kid lives in this area, and they have money, so you can get money out of those people and then give the kid up for adoption. Easy peasy. And I was friends with this woman's cousin, and they were Christians, and they didn't think this was very up and up. And they warned me and told me about the situation. It turned out to be true. And at 3 years old, she was looking into adopting out my daughter for $10,000 for a private adoption. Um, I was charged half my income when I was living below the poverty line at 19. So that was my experience with family court, and basically I was put into a situation where I couldn't pay. I could barely handle. I mean, I went with the undiagnosed depression and ADD and things like that, and I really struggled to work these crappy jobs because I'd been I'd gotten a criminal record in trying to run away from my adoptive home. So my ability to work in better fields, because I was an honest person, and I would put down that I did have a criminal record, and they'd ask what it was, and I got charged with break, enter, and theft when I ran away because me and the kids stayed in a soccer trailer. The doctor's kid who got off on mischief, whereas I got break, enter, and theft, who opened the door with his power screwdriver. Um, Anyways, we stayed in that thing overnight. I left. During the night, I was freezing. It was Alberta winter, and there was socks in there, and I took a pair of socks. So I was charged with break, enter, and theft. My parents wouldn't get me a lawyer, so I just pled guilty, and they hammered me with break, enter, and theft as a 14-year-old kid who ran away from a home that wasn't suitable. And anyways, I mean, it put me right in the deeper into the pit, you know. And so, anyways, I mean, wah, poor me. Yeah, I know. But this realization that my now only blood relative that I knew was being held in a way that felt like extortion. And if I wanted to see the child, well, I had to go to court for that and pay money. But because I was in back child support, I couldn't really do that. And since I was going in the hole $400 a month every month, despair, hopelessness, all those things set in for me. The pain of knowing that a person who would do this for money and to separate a child from its family member, as I had been, and I know how painful that is, I couldn't help but see this person as evil. And it created a traumatic feeling within me with everything to do with it. And it took years of drinking it. I fell into intravenous drug use for a little bit. Despair, real despair, abandonment of self, because I was in a situation that wasn't right. Even when I took it to, like after years of getting kicked around, raising the money to go, taking a student loan to go back to school to try and get a job that I could actually pay this amount of money. I mean, I struggled hard, and eventually I will write the whole book. And it's hard for me to go in there into my memories and think about it because it is so unjust and so brutal to consider how much family destruction I got to try to bear throughout a very sad life. So, anyways, then second time around, it's basically I was paying, and in both cases, I paid what I could. So I was paying $100 a month out of my $800 a month paycheck to this woman, and I could barely get by with that. I had to borrow sometimes, beg, borrow, steal, but I wasn't stealing. And it was horror. It was pure horror for an adoptee to be in that situation again, right? I had been amputated from my parents, and now my child was amputated from me by someone who put money above familiar connection, father, mother, family, all those things, because I was willing to marry her. And even later, after all this, she found herself without a job, and I offered to let her move in. Then it turns out that if she had moved in, she wouldn't legally be allowed to get that $400 a month again. So she didn't move in because she wanted that $400 a month. Even if she was living with me and couldn't afford to pay it when she wasn't living with me, she would have wanted that money. So this is the scenario that the family courts have created for us, that we will take more money than the father can afford for you, and if that father happens to be spending all his money on that, well, what does that mean for that young father? Can he afford to start a family? Not for about 18 years. So you've taken family and the hope of the picket fence and the wife and children from that boy. Now, had I been given a moral education, well, it said right in the Bible somewhere, don't lay down with these type of women. But I was told a different. Everyone's the same, you know. And there's no such thing as immoral women. Your mother, who had a child out of wedlock, wasn't. No, she was a brave, selfless person. So women could never be a bad person. So you should never try to avoid any particular kind of woman. Now we have slut walks that say, no, that's good. That's a good thing. Was this a good thing for everybody? Was it good for my kid who's now a drunk and a drug addict and on her second boob job? Is that what I wanted for my daughter? No. Do I want her to get smashed up in a drunk driving accident? No. No, I didn't want any of those things. I wanted her to have things I didn't have, and I was willing to try and work towards that. But would it have mattered if I would have somehow just moved on and through the pain, and which I did, but I had to medicate myself because the pain was so intense. But you know, and at the end of the day, as an adoptee who still hasn't made his connections and figured out where he belongs in the world, still trying to find his way back to his family, well, that put another big barrier to all of that. So ultimately, you know, the second go around, I was paying $400 a month willingly, and I said I don't want anything to do with maintenance because all they will do is if I fall behind is they will take my license and everything and cause me issues. These people are not trying to help the fathers, they're trying to destroy the fathers. And you can see it very clearly in anyone who has ever been in maintenance enforcement and you know, has fallen into a situation where they lose their job or run into a financial crisis or whatnot. Well, they instantly start putting up barriers to get back to work. They take your license, your passport, your bank account. Do you not think those are basic things a man might need to gain, you know, have gainful employment? Does no one think that? When you look at jobs in the want ads, just the basic jobs, how many require a driver's license? How many more jobs could you get to with a driver's license and a vehicle? How many more jobs that are driving jobs, just basic jobs anyone could do that pay fairly okay, require a license? So it's right there in front of us for everyone to see that if the court isn't involved in families, you're going to have guys that abandon their children. You're going to have women that abandon their children. There's good and bad people in all areas of life. But when we turn around and try and force one group of people to be better than the other group of people and hold them to a higher standard, well, then we're taking away their rights. You know, so let's put it this way. Here's the average situation for a lot of people, especially those that haven't been part of a larger community that can guide them through these dangerous processes. But for the average atheist, secularist, with the high school education and just the average person, well, there's all these forces at work telling you what you want to hear if you're a woman, telling you that if you two partnered up and you did so with your marriage, but things didn't work out, and then you want to separate and you maybe talk to a lawyer or a therapist through this process. Well, two things happen, right? The woman has become entitled to sort of develop an attitude that everything is that guy's fault and you should make him pay for it. And you can see it over and over and over. And this creates this sort of narcissism where the woman is allowed to lay down any sort of responsibility and attack the man, even if he's good. Now, don't get me wrong. I know that this situation came up because there was some men who abandoned their children. But again, there was women who abandoned their children as well. There's these terrible situations happening for children across the board. But we've laid all the blame over on one side and then basically given women who don't care about children and only money tools and weapons to utilize against men to get what they want. You know, it's disturbing. So if you want to then co-parent, if you ever want to see your kids again, you may have to pay upwards of 100,000, 500,000. I mean, look at these court cases going on rich celebrities, and then you go, wow. Well, at least I don't have to pay 5 million like 50 Cent or whatever crazy amount of money he was gonna have to pay. You see these things, and it the big push back in the day was separate church from state. But the family is not the domain of the state to run and control. And not only that, for you to have to pay to be a father to your child, like to pay to do it, like you're paying the courts. Like that $100,000 you pay in lawyer fees doesn't go to your child. And the woman on the other side, well, if she gets the husband to pay for her lawyer fees too, well, there's maybe $200,000 you just paid to be a father to your child. Well, when your child grows up and goes, listen, you idiot, why did you give my inheritance to these idiots? Why couldn't you have had faith that I'm your child and I was going to come to you eventually anyways? Why did you play their game? Well, I mean, there's police and they suspend your license, your passports, all these things. You don't have any choice but to play this, pay to be part of a family. Pay to play family? Pay to play family. That's what we have. So, and those are pretty high stakes. So all that being said, I mean, the person who can remain within their religion and realize the nightmare that exists out here for the family, but it's a nightmare even for the woman. Because if she develops an attitude where everything is men's fault and it's her job to punish them by taking all their money and putting them out on the streets if they can, even though that eventually dries up their golden goose because they can't think ahead, then what kind of person are you creating? That's a very sick person. And although society has kind of, brought up the narcissist to look at as evil, which it kind of is, it's also a tragedy and something to be seen as a horror because you've taken what's supposed to be the divine spirit of mother and you've turned it into something else. Now, again, I'm generalizing about what's happening and the shift from the good people trying to work together and build up and be part of a family and flourish and nurture into this dog eat dog toxicity of 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 warfare and buying all the weapons from the court. Whoever can afford the best weapons from the court or the most justice wins. And if you don't pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to court to see your child, well, you're just a piece of shit. But you're not. You're. So, yeah, the system is broken and it's breaking us.